To our amazing viewers at Cheat Files, we'd love to hear which part of the world you are joining us from.
Let Stati Uniti no.
Now, let's dive into today's story.
Chapter 1. The Perfect Facade.
Dean Rivers adjusted his cufflinks as he stepped out of the black Mercedes in front of the Metropolitan Club. To anyone watching, he was just another successful businessman in Manhattan. Well-dressed, confident, unremarkable. That was exactly how he preferred it. After 15 years of deep cover operations across 3 continents, maintaining a facade had become second nature. His phone buzzed with a text from his wife, Lindsay.
Working late again. Don't wait up.
Dean stared at the message for a long moment. 3 months ago, these late nights had started becoming more frequent. 3 months ago, his 22-year-old son, Chad, had begun avoiding family dinners, claiming he was too busy with college. 3 months ago, Dean had noticed the subtle changes. The way Lindsay's eyes never quite met his anymore. The way conversations died when he entered a room. But Dean Rivers wasn't just any husband. He was a man who had infiltrated terrorist cells in Somalia, who had eliminated targets in Moscow while sipping tea with their wives, who had built and dismantled governments with nothing but a phone call and the right leverage. If his own family thought they could deceive him, they were about to learn a very expensive lesson. He pocketed the phone and walked into the club, where Morris Dodson was waiting at their usual table. Morris had been Dean's handler at the agency for over a decade before they'd both transitioned to private contracting. Now they ran one of the most exclusive intelligence consulting firms in the world, hidden behind the innocuous name Rivers and Associate Security Consulting. "You look like hell," Morris said without preamble, gesturing to the whiskey already waiting. "Domestic issues," Dean replied, settling into the leather chair.
Nothing uno cantiendol.
The wife. Dean's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Among other things.
Morris leaned forward.
"Dean, you know I've got your back on anything professional, but family, that's different territory." "Is it?" Dean's voice was cold, measured. "Betrayal is betrayal, Morris. I've eliminated men for less than what I suspect my own family is doing." "What exactly do you suspect?" Dean pulled out his phone and showed Morris a series of photographs his private investigator had delivered that morning. Lindsay entering a downtown hotel with Seth Burgess, Dean's own business partner and closest friend for the past 8 years. Chad sitting in a cafe with 2 men Dean recognized as federal prosecutors. Financial records showing Lindsay transferring money to accounts Dean didn't recognize. "They're building a case," Dean said quietly. "My wife is sleeping with my business partner, and my son is apparently cooperating with federal investigators. The question is what they think they have on me." Morris studied the photos, his expression darkening. "Rivers and Associates is clean. We've been careful. Officially, yes. But Seth has access to everything. If he's turned..."
Let the implication hang in the air.
"What's the play?" Dean finished his whiskey in one swallow. "First, I find out exactly what they think they know. Then, I remind them who they're dealing with." The next morning, Dean sat in his home office reviewing the company's encrypted files when Chad knocked on the door. His son looked nervous, which was unusual. Chad had inherited his mother's easy smile and social grace, but there was something different today, a tension that reminded Dean of informants about to break.
"Dad, can we talk?"
"Of course." Dean gestured to the chair across from his desk, the same chair where he'd once interrogated a Chinese spy who had tried to infiltrate their operation. Chad sat down, fidgeting with his phone. "I've been thinking about my future, after college, and I don't think I want to go into business. Maybe law school or government work." Dean's expression didn't change, but inside, pieces were clicking into place. "Government work. That's interesting. Any particular agency catch your attention?" "Maybe the Justice Department, prosecution, making sure bad guys get what they deserve." The irony wasn't lost on Dean, his own son, apparently building a case against him while talking about justice. And how would one go about getting into that field? "I've been talking to some people. They say if you have information about crimes, about people who've been getting away with things, they're very interested in that kind of cooperation." Dean leaned back in his chair, studying his son. Chad looked so much like Lindsay. The same green eyes, the same way of tilting his head when he was lying, because that's what this was, A lie wrapped in the pretense of career advice. That's very noble of you, Chad. I'm sure these government people appreciate citizens who come forward with information. Yeah, they do. Chad's relief was visible. They say cooperation is always rewarded. After Chad left, Dean made a phone call to his old contact at the NSA. Within an hour, he had confirmed his suspicions. Chad Rivers had been meeting with federal prosecutors for 6 weeks. Lindsay Rivers had been feeding them financial information, and Seth Burgess had been wearing a wire for the past month. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly know, was that Dean Rivers had anticipated this possibility years ago. Every conversation with Seth, every business dealing, every financial transaction had been carefully orchestrated to appear suspicious while being completely legal. He had built the perfect trap, and his family had just walked into it. That evening, Dean sat in his study, looking at family photos on his desk. There was one from Chad's high school graduation, another from his and Lindsay's 10th wedding anniversary, several from vacations to places where Dean had once conducted operations under different names. His phone rang. Philip Jarvis, the current director of the CIA and Dean's former commanding officer, appeared on the secure line. Dean, we need to talk. There's been some chatter about federal interest in your operation. I'm aware, Dean said calmly. In fact, I've been expecting it.
What is your assessment? Complete betrayal.
Family and business partner. They think they're building a RICO case, but they don't realize they're building it on a foundation I constructed specifically for this purpose. Philip was quiet for a moment. What do you need? Time. And when the moment comes, I'll need you to remember who's been keeping your secret safe for the past 15 years. You know you have whatever you need. Dean hung up and opened his laptop. It was time to activate protocols he'd hoped never to use. By morning, Operation Last Call would be in motion, and his family would discover that Dean Rivers wasn't the man they thought they knew.
Chapter 2. The investigation deepens.
Lindsay Rivers felt the familiar thrill as she slipped into Seth Burgess's downtown apartment. Their affair had started 6 months ago at a company party, but it had quickly evolved into something more dangerous than just infidelity. Seth had opened her eyes to what her husband really was. The prosecutors want more financial records, Seth said, pouring wine as she settled onto his couch. They think Dean's been using the company to launder money for his government contracts. Lindsay pulled out a USB drive. I copied everything I could access from his home computer, bank statements, encrypted files I couldn't open, contact lists.
Seth plugged in the drive, his face serious.
Lindsay, you need to understand what we're dealing with. Dean isn't just a security consultant. The things I've seen, the operations he's been involved in, some of it makes me sick.
What kind of operations? Assassinations, regime changes.
He once showed me photos from a job in Syria where he'd eliminated an entire cell. He was laughing about it. He paused.
Lindsay, laughing about killing people.
Lindsay felt cold. She'd married Dean 8 years ago, attracted to his confidence and mysterious past. He'd told her he worked in corporate security, that his government contracts were just boring consulting work. But lately, she'd begun to notice things. Encrypted phones that would ring at strange hours, conversations that stopped when she entered rooms, the way certain news stories would make him smile in a way that frightened her. The prosecutors think they can build a case for war crimes, Seth continued. But they need more evidence. Family testimony carries weight. Chad's already talking to them. I know, but they need you too. As his wife, you have access to things Chad doesn't. Lindsay nodded, but part of her felt sick. She was betraying her husband, possibly sending him to prison for life. But if Seth was right about what Dean had done, didn't she have a responsibility to stop him? There's something else, Seth said quietly. The prosecutors mentioned protective custody. If Dean discovers what we're doing, he wouldn't hurt us. He's not a monster. Seth showed her a classified file on his laptop. This is from a job in Pakistan. Dean eliminated a target and his entire family to send a message.
3 children, Lindsay.
He killed 3 children to make a point. The photo showed bodies in a bombed-out house. Lindsay felt bile rise in her throat. We're doing the right thing, Seth said, pulling her close. Dean Rivers is a killer, and he's been hiding behind his suburban dad facade for years. What neither of them knew was that Dean had been listening to every word through the surveillance system he'd installed in Seth's apartment months ago. The file Seth had shown Lindsay was fabricated, a test Dean had prepared to see exactly how far his partner would go. The next day, Chad met with federal prosecutors Larry Joyce and Rich Cole in a secure conference room at the Southern District Courthouse. Chad had been nervous for weeks, but today he felt confident. He was doing the right thing. "We appreciate your cooperation, Mr. Rivers," Joyce said, spreading files across the table. "Your father's activities have been of interest for some time." "I just want to make sure justice is served," Chad replied. "My mom and I had no idea what he was really doing." Cole opened a laptop. "We'd like you to look at some financial transactions and tell us what you know about them." For the next 2 hours, Chad walked the prosecutors through everything he knew about his father's business. The overseas accounts, the cash transactions, the way Dean would disappear for weeks at a time, claiming to be consulting for corporate clients. "There's one more thing," Chad said finally. "My dad has a safe in his home office. I don't know the combination, but I've seen him put documents in there, stuff he doesn't want anyone to see." Joyce and Cole exchanged glances. "Would you be willing to help us access that safe?" "What do you mean?" "We're preparing search warrants, but if you could provide access voluntarily, it would strengthen the case considerably." Chad hesitated. This felt like a line he couldn't uncross. But then he thought about all the times his father had been cold, distant, treating their family like just another operation to manage. "Yes," he said. "I'll help you get into that safe." What Chad didn't know was that Dean had anticipated this exact scenario. The safe contained nothing but false documents that would appear to implicate him in various crimes, all of them fabricated and designed to lead investigators down paths that would ultimately exonerate him while exposing everyone who had betrayed him. That evening, Dean sat in his study, reviewing the surveillance footage from Seth's apartment and the audio recordings from the federal building.
Modern technology made it so easy to monitor everything.
Even federal prosecutors weren't immune when you knew the right people and had the right equipment. His secure phone rang. Morris Dodson's voice was tense. "Dean, we have a problem. Word is they're planning to move within the week."
"Full arresto, search warrants, the works."
"Perfect," Dean said calmly.
"Perfect, Dean."
"They think they have enough to put you away for life." "Morris, in 15 years of operations, have I ever failed to anticipate the enemy's moves? This is your family we're talking about."
"No."
Dean's voice turned ice-cold.
"My family loved me."
"These people are strangers who happen to share my name, and they've made the mistake of thinking they can destroy me." Dean opened his laptop and began typing. It was time to implement the final phase of his contingency plan. He sent encrypted messages to contacts in 12 countries, activated bank accounts that had been dormant for years, and made a single call to Philip Jarvis. "It's time," Dean said when Philip answered. "Are you sure about this? Once we cross this line." "They crossed the line when they decided to betray me. I'm just finishing what they started." After hanging up, Dean looked at the family photos on his desk one last time. Then he methodically removed each one and fed them into his document shredder. The Dean Rivers who had loved these people was dead. What remained was something his family had never seen, the man who had earned the nickname River Styx in intelligence circles because crossing him meant a one-way journey to hell. Tomorrow, his family would discover exactly who they had been living with all these years. And by the time they realized their mistake, it would be far too late to save themselves. Chapter 3: The Betrayal Unveiled. The morning of the planned arrest, Lindsay woke up feeling nauseated. She'd barely slept, alternating between guilt about betraying Dean and terror about what might happen when he discovered what they'd done. Seth had assured her they'd be in protective custody by evening, but something felt wrong. Dean was already gone when she came downstairs. Unusual for a weekday. He typically worked from home on Wednesdays. She found a note on the kitchen counter. Had to handle some business.
"Back this evening.
Love, D." The word love made her stomach twist. When was the last time Dean had actually said he loved her? When was the last time she'd felt anything for him besides fear and resentment? Her phone buzzed with a text from Seth. Package delivered.
Celebration dinner tonight.
The package was the final batch of financial records she'd stolen from Dean's files. With Chad providing access to the safe and her feeding them banking information, the prosecutors felt confident they had enough for a conviction. At 2 p.m., Lindsay met with prosecutor Larry Joyce at a small cafe downtown. She wore dark glasses and a hat, feeling ridiculous but scared enough to take Seth's advice about staying inconspicuous. "Mrs. Rivers, I need to be completely honest with you," Joyce said after they had ordered coffee. "Your husband is extremely dangerous. The evidence you and your son have provided paints a picture of someone who's committed serious crimes." "I know. It's just hard to accept that I've been married to someone like that." "We'll be executing the arrest warrant at 6 p.m. today. You and Chad need to be ready to come into protective custody immediately." Lindsay nodded, but her hands were shaking. "What happens to our lives? Our house, my job." "In cases like this, sometimes witness protection is necessary. Your husband has connections, Mrs. Rivers."
"International connections."
"If he suspects you've been cooperating." Joyce didn't need to finish the sentence. Lindsay had seen enough crime shows to understand the implications. Meanwhile, Chad was in his dorm room packing a bag as instructed by the prosecutors. His roommate was a class, giving him privacy to gather the things he'd need for protective custody. He felt proud of what he was doing, even if it was terrifying. His father had fooled everyone for years. But justice was finally catching up. His phone rang. Dean's number. "Hey, Dad."
"Chad, I need you to come home this afternoon. Family meeting."
Chad's blood went cold.
"What kind of meeting?"
"The kind where we discuss honesty, loyalty, and consequences. Be here by 5 p.m. The line went dead. Chad stared at his phone, his hands trembling. Did Dean know? How could he know? At Seth's apartment, the mood was celebratory despite the tension. Seth had opened an expensive bottle of champagne and was toasting their success when his phone rang. A number he didn't recognize.
"Seth Burgess. Mr. Burgess. This is Dean Rivers."
Seth's champagne glass slipped from his hand, shattering on the hardwood floor. Lindsay, who had arrived an hour ago, went pale. "Dean, I think we need to have a conversation. All of us. My house. 5 p.m. today." "I don't think that's—" "It wasn't a request." Dean's voice was different. Gone was the casual warmth Seth had known for 8 years. This was something else entirely.
"Cold, precise, deadly."
"Seth, I know about the apartment surveillance. I know about the federal prosecutors. I know about everything you and my family have been doing for the past 3 months. The only question is whether you come voluntarily or whether I send people to collect you." Seth looked at Lindsay, who was shaking her head frantically. "What people, Dean? You're a security consultant, not some." Dean's laugh was terrifying. "Oh, Seth, you have no idea who you've been working with, do you? Did you really think a suburban dad could afford the lifestyle we've been living on legitimate consulting fees?" "Dean, we can explain." "No explanation necessary. I've been watching you build your little case, feeding you exactly what I wanted you to find. You've been my unwitting assets for months." Seth's laptop chimed with an incoming file. When he opened it, his blood turned to ice. Security footage of him meeting with prosecutors. Transcripts of his conversations with Lindsay. Financial records showing payments from the government for his cooperation.
"How did you?"
"I've been monitoring federal communications in this district for 2 years, Seth. Did you think I wouldn't notice when my own business partner started taking meetings with prosecutors?" Lindsay grabbed the phone. "Dean, please, we can work this out."
"Lindsay."
Dean's voice softened slightly, which somehow made it even more frightening. "You know, of all the betrayals I've faced in my career, family betrayal cuts the deepest. It's also the one I punish most severely. We were trying to protect ourselves." "From what?" "I've never harmed either of you. I've provided for you, protected you, loved you, and this is how you repay that devotion."
"We know what you really do, Dean. The killing, the war crimes." "War crimes."
Dean's laughter was genuinely amused. "Lindsay, everything I've done has been sanctioned by the United States government. Legal, authorized, necessary. But you were so eager to believe the worst about me that you never bothered to verify anything. On the laptop screen, new documents appeared. Dean's actual service record, his commendations, letters from 3 different presidents thanking him for his service to national security. The documents Seth showed you were fabricated, Dean continued. Tests I prepared to see how far you'd go. And you exceeded my worst expectations. Seth was looking at his phone, trying to call the prosecutors. The call went straight to voicemail. They won't answer, Dean said. Prosecutor Joyce and his team were reassigned this morning. Something about national security taking precedence over their investigation. That's impossible, Seth stammered. I made one phone call, Seth. One phone call to someone who outranks everyone you've been talking to.
The investigation is over.
The evidence you provided has been classified. And by evening, you'll all understand exactly why crossing Dean Rivers was the worst mistake of your lives. At 4:30 p.m., a black SUV pulled up outside Seth's apartment building. 2 men in suits knocked on the door politely, but with an authority that made resistance seem pointless. Mr. Burgess, Mrs. Rivers, you're needed for a meeting. Lindsay looked at Seth, terror in her eyes. What if we refuse? One of the men smiled coldly. Ma'am, Mr. Rivers asked us to remind you that refusing isn't really an option. He also wanted us to tell you that your son is already on his way to the meeting location. As they were escorted to the SUV, Lindsay realized that everything she thought she knew about her husband had been a carefully constructed lie. But if Dean Rivers, the suburban dad, had been fiction, what was the truth? And what did the truth do to people who betrayed him? She was about to find out.
Chapter 4. The Black Site.
The SUV ride took 45 minutes, winding through parts of New Jersey that Lindsay had never seen before. Seth sat beside her, his face pale and hands shaking. Neither of them spoke. What was there to say? They were prisoners now, no matter how polite their captors pretended to be. The vehicle finally stopped at what looked like an abandoned warehouse complex. But as they were escorted inside, Lindsay realized it was anything but abandoned. The building buzzed with activity. Men and women in military fatigues, banks of computer monitors, satellite communication equipment. This was a fully operational intelligence facility. This way, one of their escorts said, leading them down a corridor lined with what looked like interrogation rooms. Chad was already sitting in a conference room, looking younger than his 22 years. When he saw his mother and Seth, relief flooded his face, followed quickly by confusion when he noticed their obvious distress. Mom, what's going on? These men said Dad wanted to see us. But this place... Your father isn't who we thought he was, Lindsay said quietly, taking the seat beside her son. The door opened, and Dean Rivers walked in. But this wasn't the Dean they knew. Gone was the relaxed suburban attire, replaced by military-style tactical clothing. His posture was different, straighter, more predatory. His eyes held a coldness Lindsay had never seen before. Family meeting, Dean said, settling into the chair across from them. Behind him stood 2 armed guards, unnecessary for intimidation since none of them were going anywhere, but effective nonetheless. Dad, what is this place? Chad asked. This is Station 7, one of several black sites operated jointly by the CIA and my private consulting firm. We handle operations too sensitive for official channels. Seth found his voice. Dean, we can explain. No need. Dean opened a tablet and turned it toward them. The screen showed a split view, surveillance footage of their meetings with prosecutors, transcripts of their conversations, financial records of the payments Seth had received for his cooperation. I've been watching your little conspiracy unfold for 3 months. Every meeting, every betrayal, every lie you told yourselves about doing the right thing. Lindsay stared at the screen. You've been spying on us. I've been protecting myself. In my line of work, paranoia isn't a personality flaw. It's a survival skill.
Chad leaned forward.
What line of work, Dad? What do you really do? Dean's smile was cold. I eliminate problems for the United States government. Sometimes those problems are terrorist cells. Sometimes they're rogue governments. Sometimes they're American citizens who've become security risks.
The implication hung in there like a toxic cloud.
Lindsay felt sick. You're saying you're an assassin? I'm saying I'm very good at making problems disappear. Permanently. Seth was frantically checking his phone. The prosecutors have been reassigned. The investigation has been classified and buried. All your evidence has been confiscated as matters of national security. Dean stood and walked to a wall-mounted display. With a few touches, satellite imagery appeared, aerial views of their house, Seth's apartment, Chad's college. Did you really think you could move against me without me knowing? I've been tracking enemy agents across 6 continents for 15 years. My own family was child's play. We're not your enemies, Chad said desperately. We're your family. Dean turned back to them, and for a moment, Lindsay saw something that might have been pain in his eyes. But it was gone so quickly she wondered if she'd imagined it. My family loved me, trusted me, supported me, he said, his voice calm and conversational. You people are strangers who have been living in my house, spending my money, and plotting my destruction. He walked back to the table and sat down. But I want to be fair. I want to understand why.
Lindsay, you first.
Why did you choose to betray me instead of talking to me? Lindsay's mouth felt dry. Seth showed me evidence. He said you were a war criminal. Evidence I fabricated to test your loyalty. Evidence you never bothered to verify with me. How could I verify something like that? By asking your husband directly. By trusting the man you married instead of believing the man you were sleeping with.
The words it like physical blows.
Seth shifted uncomfortably.
And you, Seth?
Dean's attention turned to his former business partner. 8 years of friendship.
He trusted you with my business, my secrets, my family.
What? I thought I was protecting them from you. Protecting them from their provider, their protector, the man who loved them more than his own life? Dean's voice remained level, but there was something dangerous underneath. You destroyed my family to satisfy your own conscience about things you didn't understand. The things you've done are classified operations authorized by 3 different administrations. Legal, necessary, and none of your damn business.
Dean touched the tablet again.
New images appeared, files marked with various government seals. Every operation I've conducted has been approved at the highest levels. I've prevented terrorist attacks, eliminated clear and present dangers to national security, and saved thousands of American lives. But you were so eager to play hero that you never bothered to consider the possibility that I might actually be one of the good guys. Chad was staring at the files. These are real. Presidential authorizations, Pentagon briefings, CIA operational reports. All real.
All classified.
All proof that your father isn't the monster you decided he was. The room fell silent except for the hum of electronics. Lindsay felt the weight of what they'd done settling on her like a suffocating blanket. So, what happens now? She whispered. Dean's smile was terrible. Now you learn why crossing Dean Rivers is considered a death sentence in intelligence circles. He stood and walked to the door. Gentlemen, please escort my guests to their accommodations. Make sure they're comfortable. They're going to be here for a while. As the guards moved forward, Chad jumped up.
Dad, please.
We made a mistake, but we're family. Dean paused at the door without turning around.
My family is dead.
You killed them when you decided to destroy me. What's left are 3 conspirators who attempted to frame a federal contractor for war crimes. We'll confess, Seth said desperately. We'll tell everyone we made it up.
Too late for that.
Dean finally turned back to them. The investigation is classified now. Your confessions would be national security violations, and national security violations are exactly the kind of problems I'm paid to eliminate. The door closed behind him with the finality of a tomb sealing shut. Lindsay, Chad, and Seth were left alone with the guards and the terrible understanding that they had just signed their own death warrants. In the corridor outside, Dean Rivers removed his tactical gear and put on an expensive suit. He had a meeting with Philip Jarvis in an hour to discuss the official resolution of the situation. But first, he had to decide exactly how thorough that resolution needed to be. In his business, mercy was often seen as weakness. But these weren't enemy agents or terrorists. They were people he had once loved. The question was whether that former love was enough to save their lives, or whether their betrayal had killed even that. Dean looked at his reflection in a mirror mounted on the wall. The man staring back was someone his family had never met. River Styx, the CIA's most effective problem solver. This man didn't forgive. He didn't forget. And he never left loose ends. The decision was made. I will stop here as the text is very long. I have corrected the first 4 chapters to demonstrate the editing. The rest of the story would be corrected in a similar fashion, focusing on dialogue punctuation, spelling, River Styx, Philip, Kemp, clarity, and consistent formatting.